Hey artists, welcome back to our mini still life draw along. So we are going to tackle in this video guide the croissant. Now remember, you're drawing from that pre-recorded still life I have up on Canvas. Okay, so make sure you've got your laptop or your phone, right? Usually I would have my phone open for this, but because I'm recording on my phone, right, I'm going to have the laptop to the side. So we're working off of this croissant here. So have your reference up. You're also going to need, your regular number 2 pencils. Looking at the value of that croissant, mostly still kind of in that middle value range, so you probably won't need the ebony just yet. We'll save that for the cast shadows, but you certainly will want to have your blending stump, kneaded eraser, pencil sharpener, right, as well as your regular eraser. Now also, please take a moment to get a piece of paper towel or scrap paper to act as a shade guard. You've done some gorgeous shading work already on that glass bottle that we took a good 40-50 minute session on. So I want you to have something to rest your hand on, so that as you're shading, right, your dominant hand, so I'm right-handed, all of you lefties out there, right, it would be here, so that as you're shading, you're not smearing any of your beautiful pencil work you've already done. Okay, so I've got my reference all up here off to the side, right, so I'm not making it up as I go. I've got my reference off to the side. It's tricky to get it all on camera. Okay, and I'm just going to take a quick moment to observe where I see some of my form shadows, right? I've got a really heavy top-down light source from the studio lights that I put on while lighting the still life, and I've got some nice deep shadows here on the underside, okay, and lots of light towards the top. So I'm going to start for those form shadows, and I'm going to go for those darker middles. Remember, with our glass, we started with just kind of the true middle value, and then we did some subtractive and additive drawing work. Here, we're going to go back to just doing mostly additive and a little bit of subtractive, right? Because it's not a shiny reflective surface. It's more of this soft red. So I'm looking first to observe where I see some of my heaviest shadows. So I'm going to be working with that 3 to, or I'm sorry, not 3, that 4 to 5 pressure. And I'm just looking where I see some of the darkest value shadows and following some of that contour line that I had below. Now, I'm using the side of my pencil, and I like to use little circles and little curved strokes, because then this is a curved object, a rounded object, so we're shading with the form, to use the wonderful Mr. Kelly's term. Right, Mr. Kelly, drawing teacher who used to be here. So we'll use his term, shade with the form. All right, so I'm following some of what I see are the deepest pockets of shadow, and I'm at that 4, I could even be to a 5 pressure in some of those heaviest shadow areas. Pressing pretty firm. So I'm looking right now for the darkest value form shadows that I see on the underside of that croissant. And it makes sense, those darkest form shadows, right? Not talking cast shadows yet. Remember, form shadows are the shadows on the objects themselves. Cast shadows are when an object casts that shadow onto an object. All right, so I'm just looking for those darkest value form shadows right now on the form of this croissant. And just putting them in nice and heavy, using that good 4 pressure. No worries, we'll go back and give them a smudge in a second. Right now I'm just getting that form value work there, that form shadow and that dark value worked up, right? When I freeze when I'm drawing, I can't chew gum and walk at the same time as I'm trying to think and observe and shade. Takes a lot of brain power to draw well all. You gotta really be a focused, careful, patient observer as you draw. And just the more you do it, the better you're gonna get at it. And then all under the under edge of this croissant here, I guess this kind of comes out a little bit further this way, is pretty dark, pretty heavy. So again, I'm at that 4, like almost a 5 pressure. I'm not quite to a 5 pressure, not yet, but almost. It's like just about there. Okay, now I'm gonna take my, oh, I'm not yet. I'm seeing another little area where I could do some more. Right up in here along that edge. See, there's always like one extra one you catch, you know what I mean? As you're going, you're like, no, I got this. Then you realize, oh, no, I don't. It's always like one extra little bit. Okay, and now I'm gonna use my blending stump. Actually, this goes quite dark. All down around this bottom edge here too. Which makes sense, it's really far away from the light source. And now I'm gonna just do a nice blend. Again, really direct the pencil. I'm not just smearing the pencil around. I'm really directing where it goes on the form. Blending out some of those pencil strokes. Yes, I see that there are other darker or kind of dark middle values there. We will get to those next. I'm just starting with the absolute darkest pockets of shadow that I can see. Here we go. All right, and just kind of working my way around. Okay, and now I'm gonna kind of look at like the next. So if that was like my darkest, now I'm gonna look at the next, kind of that more like 3, 4 kind of middle value form shadow. Because I can see now as I move further away from those darker areas, I still have some form shadow, but it's a lighter form shadow. It's definitely more of that middle value range. And it comes along bottom, up to the side here, comes up the side of this. And the reason we see all these little shadows are the folds of that croissant. There's like a, you know, it's like the pastry wrapped around itself. Or, I mean, in this case, it's fake pastry, it's foam, but you get the idea. That kind of comes up the surface. There's a little bit more of a middle in there. And so now I'm just starting to look for those lighter, more like 3 middle values. Again, remembering to curve my shading stroke. Keep things feeling really rounded, right? Because it's a curved object, so it's not flat. And that continues about halfway up the croissant. Right, it's got some pretty extreme lighting. I put some extreme lighting on here so we'd have really, you know, distinct, I don't want to say easy, but certainly easier shadows to follow as we shaded. Okay, same thing over here, this really pretty much middle all the way around into a little bit of light here. And then you can see that really the cast shadow underneath this croissant is really dark, right? I mean, so that's why I'm sticking with my regular number 2 and not bringing the ebony in yet, because I want to bring the ebony in for those super darker values. This is much more light. Right, if I look at the overall tone and value of the drawing. Okay, and then as I come up here, We've got some more middle, a little bit of middle through here. And then we start getting into some of our lighter values. Okay, so I'm gonna take a minute, do another little blend, and then we'll start bringing some of those lighter tones, those more like 1s and 2s, working with the eraser a little bit towards the top, because that's where our croissant is catching a lot more of the light. And we can even get into some drawing just with the blending stump itself too, for some of those really light tones. Actually, just kind of observing what I see here. This actually needs to go a little darker on this interior edge. And then there's like a little reverse highlight thing happening there. And this kind of comes out more that way. Okay, and then, you know, and anywhere you over blend a little bit, you're like, actually, no, I think that's lighter down around that area. Just grab your kneaded eraser and adjust that value. You know, take your time, get it just right. Excellent. Okay, good. And then as it gets towards the top of our croissant, it gets really light. You can see we have this really, right, these we get very, very light, like pencil pressure 1 and 2 form shadows up here, and then it's very, very bright and light over at the top of the croissant. So now let's take our pencil, and now we're gonna use like that 1-2 pressure, and we're just gonna very lightly start putting in what we see as the values and form shadows we see as it transitions lighter towards the top. So I'm holding the pencil like way at the end, and I'm just starting to build up some of that texture, right? It's not like the glass where it's smooth, so it's like a dimpled surface almost. You know, and so I'm starting to just observe and see where that dimpling is happening. And just, you know, it's kind of, it's a light touch. It's very light. You can even experiment too, if you're feeling it, with just drawing with the blending stump too. I'm gonna bring that in a minute. But right now I'm just slowly starting to bring some of that lighter value to the top. Particularly off this particular part of the croissant, they're like, you can really see some of the folds as it wraps up around. Okay. Very light value. Yeah, that looks great. Okay, so now I'm gonna take my blending stump, and this is a very gentle pressure, not heavy at all. I'm gonna start just drawing and blending and smoothing with my paper stump, my tortillon here, and just creating some of those softer tones and values. And I'm barely pressing the blending stump to the paper at all. It's a really delicate touch. I'm just getting some of that graphite to move, to smudge off of the blending stump. Get it to really softly blend. Right, all the way up into the top to where I see, and this is where I'm just going to start drawing with the blending stump. I really see that pencil just like, it just fades away. Just we totally lose it, but we want to keep that texture of the croissant. That looks lovely. Okay, now I'm going to go back with my eraser, and just on the edge here where I have, you know, it's really light. I'm just moving around the other side of my camera here. Just going to really clean up the edge where it's the lightest and it hits that bottle. And then again, to eliminate this outline, in reality, there's some really dark shadows that are happening behind this croissant. You can see that. But what I'm going to do for now is just like we did with the bottle, I'm just going to add a little bit of tone there so I understand kind of visually for myself that this croissant is coming up against a dark background and that I just see this light edge of the croissant hitting that dark fabric. So I'm just going to add in a little tone behind it and give it a smudge. And like I said, when we go to do the fabric, we'll work those values a bit more. And there we go. There is our croissant. Right up to the edge of the glass bottle there. I'm just going to darken the shadow on the glass bottle just a little bit for now. And we'll change the value of that later. Okay. And now I'm just going to go back and look at any areas where I want to maybe touch up my shading a little bit. If I look at it and I'm like, you know, that's actually a little darker there than it is lighter. Or like here, this shadow edge I think is actually a little bit wider and lighter. So I'm just going to bring that out. And again, just trying to maintain the texture or the look of that texture, that implied texture of what I see happening on the croissant. I just might, just in a little couple of nooks here, just on that really deep under edge, go in for a real, like heavy pressure with the ebony pencil and just darken up just a little bit on those under edges of the croissant where it gets quite dark here and fades just about into nothing. There we go. Just a little bit there. All right. And there is our croissant. Join me in the next video because we're going to go right on to this ceramic bowl. Okay, and see if we can get the ceramic bowl completed so that we can then work the fruit inside of it. All right, so join me in the next video. Let's work our next largest object, the ceramic bowl. Thanks for drawing with me all today, artists.